Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everybody, depending on what time you are watching us. And welcome to this webinar around insurance in the cyber industry and cyber in the insurance industry, indeed, and how we really engage SMEs and charities in getting themselves protected from the risks which are huge out there, but which we know that they don't always recognise. Delighted to be joined today by a number of quite illustrious panelists. And let's start with introductions. Um, Tom, you've just gone screen on with me, so can I ask you just to say hi, please, and introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi Mark. My name's Tom Simcox. I'm the owner of the insurance broker down in Bristol, Simcox Brokers. We're a commercial insurance broker with all sorts of specialism in professional indemnity, cyber, and financial lines insurance, like directors and officers insurance.
That's brilliant. Thanks, Tom. Paul Peters. Paul.
Yeah, hi Mark. I'm your counterpart in Wales, so I'm the Managing Director of the Cyber Resilience Centre for Wales, which, as you know, is a not-for-profit police-led organisation which is really there to support businesses improve their cyber resilience.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Paul. Emma, hi.
Hi, I'm Emma Francis. I'm the Financial Risks Executive at Thomas Carroll. Thomas Carroll are an employee-owned brokers in South Wales, so offices throughout South Wales and also London.
That's great. Thanks. And last but certainly not least, Shaune.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Mark. Shaune Worrall from the British Insurance Brokers Association, BIBA, where I'm the technical policy lead for cyber insurance.
That's great. Thank you all for joining us today. Really grateful that you're giving up your time. If I can ask, if you just jump onto mute, if you're not talking, that might save a bit of background interference for us. I wanted to kickstart a bit of the conversation just with cyber insurance. Why do we need it? You're all working in the industry. I work, as does Paul, with a lot of small businesses who are suspicious, frankly, I guess, about why they would need to buy something else. Shaune, can I perhaps come to you? I guess you might have an overview. What are the issues around businesses and charities in getting this kind of cyber insurance? Shaune, did you want to jump on with that one? Yeah, you're muted at the moment. Forgive me. Okay. Can't hear Shaune. It's always good to start with a technical issue. Tom, can I perhaps come to you for your thoughts? Why is there this need for cyber insurance products for small businesses?
Well, I think the need has arisen from probably demand and the nature of the way that we do business now. Probably more well, since COVID. I mean, we're all sort of doing things remotely on our laptops, and I think you know, digital. Everyone really now has a sort of digital risk. There aren't many businesses I know that wouldn't be transacting business online, holding data online. So that's where that's kind of come from. And also, I think the insurance industry has obviously, the product has evolved out of PI, commercial insurance, where you know, insurers have stayed silent on this. And that obviously, you know, the demand for specialist products come out of that because you know, it's a risk that needs to be covered now. And then obviously standalone cyber insurance policies have come into play as a result of that.
Yeah, that's great. Shaune, from your perspective, looking across the industry, do you see this as a product which smaller businesses genuinely should be, you know, getting on board with more?
Yeah, absolutely. Because I think a cyber attack can be devastating for anyone. But particularly if you're a smaller business, so you don't have your in-house IT support team, but maybe you outsource all of your IT to a managed service provider, you really need help when things go wrong. And I think the good thing about the cyber insurance services you get now is that they hold your hand right from start to finish. So, you know, you get that piece of ransomware that says, you know, pay me Bitcoin to decrypt your systems and get access to your computers. And it must be one of the worst feelings, really, because, what do I do? Who do I pick up the phone to? The great thing is, if you buy a cyber insurance product, you're going to have access to that instant response team straight away. So you're going to have people at your insurance company who will, lead you by the hand all the way through the process. So how do you restore backups? What mitigation is required? Who do you need to contact? Do you need to make contact with the ICO, the Information Commissioner's Office? How do you contact your customers? Have you had a cyber breach? All of those kind of myriad of things, which I know from talking to people where this has happened, it gets very confusing. It's fraught, emotionally too. So to kind of have that insurer there to say, do this, do this, do this, we're in touch with these people, I think from the people I've spoken to is tremendously reassuring, as well as at the end of the process, financially helpful. So, but it's, it's very likely to happen to a lot of us. I do know from some of the one of the leading cyber insurers stats that 96% of the claims or attacks are against SMEs. Oh. So this situation where people say, "Oh, it's I'm not a big company; it'll never happen to me." Odds are it probably will. It's not about how big you are; it's how vulnerable you are, which is the key thing there. So can be devastating, but great support there through insurance products to make sure that is as less a painful process as it can be.
Yeah, it's a pretty compelling figure there. Emma, your business covers a pretty wide geography. What's your experience then? Is there enough take up by customers of something that sounds like it should be a no-brainer? And if not, what's preventing them?
Yeah, the cyber insurance uptake is increasing, but it's certainly not widespread yet. So there's definitely a job for us to do. I think what we're seeing is education and awareness around cyber risk is really key. So, Shaune mentioned SMEs, 96% of them being subject to a breach, and for us, it's just educating them that it can happen to them, because it often is that perception that it won't happen to us, and it certainly can happen to them. So it's down to us really to educate business owners who often wear in the SME sector a lot of different hats. So, they're doing their marketing, they're in charge of their technology, the business, and amongst other things. So it's just educating them really on cyber risk and actually the implications of what can happen to their business if they do suffer a breach, and the costs involved with that, the time involved with responding to that breach. All those things are really important. So although the uptake we are seeing it increase, it is not as widespread as we would like, because ultimately we want to protect businesses and make sure that they can manage when the worst does happen.
Yeah,
and Mark, if I can jump in, just to reinforce that sort of statistic around sort of experience in cybercrime. I'm not sure if the panel's aware, but recently the Federation of Small Businesses released their report on crime against business, and in their sort of report, 72% of small businesses have experienced cybercrime in the last 2 years, which is a huge amount.
Yeah. And it's the education piece, and often I think businesses think that cyber insurance is really costly, and when you think of like conflicting budgets and things like that, and it's something that they don't currently purchase, there is that budget conflict that they have. So it's providing them with that information on how much a breach can cost them, not just financially, reputationally as well, and just providing that information so they have all that information to make an informed decision on the cyber cover and how it can protect them.
So Tom, I'm interested. What kickstarts the conversations about cyber insurance? In your experience, do people come knocking on your door and say we'd like to get something like this because we see it as a risk? Or is it something that you're having to push? How does the conversation happen? And what are the blockers when it does happen? Forgive me, you're muted.
I think all up from our angle, and probably for what we're known for as a company, are all our kind of incoming inbound leads, whether that comes through our website or word of mouth. It's always driven by PI, public liability insurance, and which is what is then driven by that is contractual requirements, what the regulators want. So in terms of how I suppose from an insurance perspective, it's still a cross-sold product, which I still don't see. I just don't know. Obviously we're in it, but I still don't understand how it should be a cross-sold product. From my perspective, from our business, I mean, we're obviously FCA. We have to have PI insurance. Cyber is the most important cover, I personally think, for this business, in many ways, because of the data and, as you know, Emma's point, the catastrophic loss that can happen, and it's almost like claims that you see in negligence. There's legal fees, they drag on, there's arguments, and it takes a long time. Cyber insurance to me is almost a bit like a car crash. It can kind of happen like that, and it can just stop the business operating. And obviously having those the helplines and all the support and the service that you would get with that is a really compelling sort of argument for it. And I think in terms of how where it would come up would be point of quote renewal. We'd obviously I think we're pretty proactive at talking to clients all about it. Sometimes maybe the timing can be better because they're concentrating on their PI renewal or something like that. So maybe it should come in later because they've got too many things focused on that. And also reviewing exclusions and other policies. So obviously at that point when you're looking through the PI, most the policies will now have cyber exclusions on it. So you would be pointing out that to the client and saying, you can get the standalone cover for this risk. That would be a good point to talk about. And in terms of your earlier point, in terms of incoming, I think we've probably had a handful of clients come in and asking us for cyber insurance. And the two drivers for that, I've had a few where they've said, like, their banks or loan providers have asked for it, investors. So if they're looking for investment rounds, they want cyber insurance. They want to have cyber insurance in place. And also the classic, I think most clients we've got who've got it have had a breach and they haven't been insured, and then they've taken it out. So that's they then coming to you for the cover.
It's interesting, isn't it? I think we all observe that this is one of the key business risks, and yet the thing that pushes people to start the conversation is very often an external factor. It's someone else requiring them to do it, or it's something that's happened and they want to do that closing the door after the stable's bolted piece.
Yeah.
Paul, I'm kind of interested. So from the Cyber Resilience Centre perspective, where does insurance sit as part of an overall resilient approach? And I guess as part of that, I'm also interested in things like, the Cyber Essentials scheme, which might form part of those conversations too.
So for people who don't know, Cyber Essentials is basically a government-backed minimum standard scheme aimed at protecting your organization against a whole range of sort of the most common cyber attacks. Basically there's two forms. There's Cyber Essentials, where you can do a self-assessment, and there's Cyber Essentials Plus, where you can do a third party comes in and makes that assessment. But I guess with Cyber Essentials, you get your policy gives you £25,000 worth of cover, which does cover things like legal expenses, IT expenses, data recovery expenses, extortion threat, potentially sort of data protection fines. But I think it's important to recognise that £25,000 is not a lot of money when it comes into some of these larger cyber attacks. So Yes, that cover is great to have free with Cyber Essentials. It might be sufficient for a small breach or an incident, but if you suffer a serious problem or more than one incident, it's unlikely that that's going to be sufficient to cover. So certainly from our perspective, yeah, we're really keen to sort of support businesses obtain Cyber Essentials, and we certainly promote that. But we also think it's very useful to have that conversation about whether that actually covers your needs. And if you assess that it doesn't cover your needs, then you really need to be thinking about taking out insurance, a specific cyber insurance.
So, Shaune, I'm interested in how the offer is shaping up for those business and those charity clients. If at the the near end of the scale there is something like a Cyber Essentials, which gives them a minimal thing, what offers are there after that? How complicated is cyber? What does the product look like for me as a consumer?
I think first of all, tracking back to Cyber Essentials, what a great opportunity at that accreditation point to discuss your particular business's cyber insurance needs. And I'd like to see Cyber Essentials really expand to be able to have, as Paul's saying, that conversation, because this is annually renewed as well. So there's an annual opportunity to discuss how cyber insurance can help your business. How we wind that into the conversation at that point, or maybe it goes into the accreditation process itself, because cyber insurance is likely to contribute to the overall cyber resilience of that business. So it has a relevance actually within the Cyber Essentials accreditation program. So, but there and also at the point of accreditation, we would, encourage people to speak to a broker to have a conversation about those individual needs. And that also is not just with thinking like, post a breach situation or a loss, and these great services come in to help you. But good cyber insurance now will do, 24/7 threat monitoring, vulnerability scanning, and a number of security features, so that hopefully, your chances of having that criminal cyber attack are less. So, and it's one of the very few policies where you don't have to claim to get value from the policy. I can't think of too many others like that. So, for us, we would encourage, a bigger, wider conversation at the point of Cyber Essentials accreditation, maybe through the accreditation process to make people aware, as Emma's saying, and then, talk to your local broker. I would say BIBA offers a find a broker service, find insurance. So if you wanted to contact somebody, you can go to the BIBA website or give us a call and they'll put you in touch and have that conversation. And I think when people are in that mindset as well, they've done the work for the accreditation, they've been accredited. Security, IT security is great. It's not perfect. There'll always be some criminal who can break the system. And that's when you want to be able to rely on your cyber insurance as well. So, or we're all humans. So you can have really good IT security programs. But, the human can break it still. Or you have a 0-day vulnerability. And I've seen that in firms as well. So, and not necessarily big ones. These are SMEs too. So, great to have the conversation. If we can have more conversations around Cyber Essentials, terrific. Other than that, it's a great program.
Emma, I'm interested about the knowledge gaps that might exist around cyber. You'll have worked with, I know, lots of other brokers, both within and outside your organisation. And my assumption is that these can be probably quite difficult conversations to have, because the client may frequently not be well informed about what cyber safety looks like. And it must be quite tough for an industry that isn't necessarily focused on cyber as well. I'm really reassured that Shaune says, well, look, there's a point of contact here that says, go through us and find a cyber expert broker. And we're lucky to have you guys on the call. But I can imagine that for some, this must be quite an intimidating conversation to have with clients. Am I right or not?
I I think most brokers understand that their clients have a cyber risk. I mean, what business doesn't rely on technology nowadays, whether you're manufacturing, an online retailer, whether it's back office support? I mean, most businesses, if not all, will rely on technology in one way, shape or form. So we know that there's a risk. I think sometimes it's making it relevant to that end business owner, that person you're speaking to. So it's just, we mentioned discussing individual needs with that person. So do they hold a lot of sensitive information? Do they have a big risk there? Do they have a big business interruption risk if they had some downtime and they can't manufacture, they can't sell, they've got a big business interruption risk in that respect? It's just understanding, how they make their money, what the risk is if they've hold a lot of sensitive data, and then having that conversation with them, and it makes it relevant to the person that you're speaking to. So I think that's really important. And also, business owners or that individual that you're speaking to just they don't talk about cyber risk every day like we do, so they may not just understand the implications that a breach can have for that organisation. So it's just bringing that risk home to them in how that they can be affected, whether that be business interruption, reputationally, and just having that conversation really. And Shaune mentioned a lot of the things that the insurers do, with the loss prevention services and things like that, which are really important, that insurers can help and provide. So there's loads of things that the insurance industry are doing to help clients, and we're speaking regularly on the subject just to make sure that everyone is aware of the risk and protecting themselves as far as possible. Great, you want to prevent these things from happening and having all that security in place, but it's going to be an error that someone makes that's going to have that situation happen to you, someone clicking on that link and making that mistake. So you might have spent an awful lot in your IT budget, you might put a lot in place, but it's just understanding that that human factor is a really difficult risk to manage.
I think it's really reassuring that we can have that conversation in terms of a business risk rather than a technical risk, which I know is a conversation that many people find quite difficult. Tom, has that been your experience too, or are there issues around the complexities of questions that might be asked on proposal forms that sometimes make it difficult for people to engage? You're muted again, sorry.
Sorry, I'll get it right one day. Yeah, I think the knowledge gap. I think initially, I mean, when I think cyber insurance, it's really come on in my last couple of years, really. And I think the difficulty has been, obviously it's an emerging product, and insurers don't have all the data that they do on property and established insurances. So initially, I think the forms were extremely complicated to complete. I wasn't 100%, I wasn't convinced some of the insurers really know, because they're not cybersecurity specialists, why they're asking those questions. But I think as the product's evolved, I think it's becoming more a lot easier really to purchase the cover and make it an easier transaction in terms of what questions they ask. I still think some insurers are probably taking the view that they're not going to ask too much, but we built the data up now. But then I also think it's quite good to ask certain questions, even if you've got like a sort of small risk questionnaire. I think because then it encourages businesses to, even if they decide they don't take the insurance out, at least they're ticking all the boxes to prevent, a cyber hack happening, really, and meeting best practice, which I guess is what the situation is with the Cyber Essentials and doing that. And also, I think in terms of what the gap looks like, I think that's quite. I think it's a fairly broad question. I think the gap across sector. I think you probably look at quite across business sectors. I think looking at our client base, I think I personally think a lot of traditional services that there seems to be a gap in why they're not buying this cover. And I don't know whether that's awareness, or there needs to be more education, or there's not a belief that they need the product, or that sort of thing. Whereas, you know, the more emerging tech companies, you know, they know the answers. You can get into quite technical conversation with those people in terms of what they understand, why the insurer is asking those questions. So yeah, I think it's quite sector specific in terms of what the gaps are.
I think that's quite an interesting scene to mime there. So I'm going to pass that one on to Paul with the hospital pass. But Paul, in your experience then, so that issue around different sectors engaging differently with cyber as a broad topic, not just insurance, have you found particular groups, industries, sectors that are less willing to have these conversations, that are less open to protecting themselves and doing what they need?
Probably if I rephrase your question, so I think, yeah, there's some of the work that we've done in Wales has very much been aimed at these sort of high street sort of business. And I think there was a real sort of perception that cybercrime doesn't affect them. They're not going to be hit by a cyber attack. They're a small business. They're in a small town. And as Shaune said earlier, that's just not the case. It's about the vulnerability rather than sort of your location. So what we've found is, yeah, there are quite a number of your very small micro businesses, I think, that struggle to engage, and there's probably other sort of sectors as well, I think, and it's probably down, picking up on something Emma said earlier, down to awareness. And what we find is when we start explaining, you know, the really simple steps that you can take and how vulnerable they potentially are because they're using a very weak password, for example. You know, you can see sometimes that the awareness it starts picking up, and they start realizing actually this could impact. And I guess one analogy I would make is that, you know, nobody plans to be burgled, but we still insure, you know, make sure that we've got insurance that covers the event should that burglary happen. And we need to start thinking about cyber, I think, in the same terms. So that's a sort of message we try and get across is, yeah, put the steps in place, but also be prepared for when it happens. And one way of sort of preparing for that is to sort of have that insurance in place. So I think, come back to your original question, yeah, I think we have found probably more size related an awareness of the issue rather than sort of sector specific, but that's not to say that the sector specific issue isn't there.
Yeah, thanks, Paul. If I can pose a question to Emma, sort of linked to that, has it been your experience that once we get somebody over the line with this, you know, once they are engaged, that they stay engaged? Or do you find that after a year or two, clients are pulling away from this product because they're not seeing, they haven't made a claim?
No, generally, once someone's engaged, I think they have a good understanding of the risk, and they are engaged. And yes, I think in that respect, you don't really see clients pulling away after a certain number of years. I think once they've got that understanding, understand their risk, then they continue with the policy and with the coverage. Once they get to that point, I suppose they know how the insurance policy can help them as well. If something did happen, that initial incident response, which you touched upon, is so crucial. So if something did happen, a lot of businesses don't have in-house expertise to deal with that. So the fact that they have the insurance company to help them, it gives them that comfort, and it's not something that they're going to readily take away. I think once you've got that cover, it's quite a big decision then to sort of take it away and take on that risk, because if the worst does happen, the implications financially, reputationally, can be really significant for a business. So once they understand that, they don't really want to take away the insurance. So yeah, I think they tend to stick with it.
Which is positive because it gives us less to do, right? We just need to get them across the line once rather than keep pushing them across the line.
That's right. And depending on this, the size of the organisation, some businesses are quite sophisticated when it comes to this and really understand the risk. And there's many people are engaged with the policy within that organisation. But then with SMEs, it's getting them engaged, getting them understanding the risk, and then we can make sure that they're protected properly. Hopefully they've, got that preventative piece in place. You've mentioned cyber essentials and some other things. And then, if it all else fails, the insurance is there as it would be if there was a burglary, as Paul said.
And so, Shaune, if I can direct this one to you, you might have a bit of an industry view on this. If I don't have cyber insurance and something happens, how bad is it likely to be? I know that's how long is a piece of string question, but looking at the kind of claims that you're seeing across the industry, is this a minor headache for people, or is this an existential crisis?
I wouldn't want to dramatize it, but if you think there was a haulage firm in Leicestershire called Knights of Old, and I think it was last year, they had a cyber attack, a prolonged cyber attack, and it drove them out of business. Now, there were probably other contributing factors to that, I don't know, but it's well publicized at the time. And it's, how do you survive if you don't have the support to deal with it? So, from your IT backup mitigation sort of process to the financial process, you may not survive. It could be that devastating. I suppose then you get to firms where, if I'm an individual with responsibility in that firm for my kind of operational continuity, or if I'm a part of a small board of directors, maybe I have shareholders, what are they going to expect of me? Because if I haven't insured for this and this financial protection was available, I hope you've got good directors and officers cover, I suppose. So I think everybody has a responsibility to look at the risk, see how they're going to mitigate that exposure through robust IT security, and then maybe through insurance as well, because that's never going to be 100% sort of fail safe. So yeah, it can be absolutely devastating and take firms out of business, or it could, seriously dent your income. A lot of things that, maybe people aren't so quite aware of is the business interruption and the cost of that. So you might have an increased cost of working, as we call it, our jargon, I suppose, for keeping the business going. So where are you going to get that from? Where's that in the cash flow type for many firms? So that's a key element of this. So it's what keeps the wheels driving on this, and insurance really helps with that. It's financial resilience, and it's survivability of the firm sometimes.
So it's a really, really helpful conversation today. A number of themes have come out. I think one of the things that I want to try and pull out from today was, how we close this gap, which perhaps is one for a next conversation when we look at what some solutions might be. But I know in sort of preparing for this, so the government figures would suggest that 7% of businesses have got a discrete cyber insurance policy, standalone cyber insurance. And yet we know that a third of them will spot an attempted cyber attack every year. And we know, as Shaune says, that many of those can prove really damaging or just final for a business. So closing that gap between the 7% and a far higher figure feels like a really important thing for us. I'd probably like to kind of wind up just going around the table with a final thought on what's the one big problem that you think we need to try and address in order to close that gap a little bit. Paul, can I come to you first? What's the one thing you'd want to sort?
So ransomware, which obviously is encrypting people's data, I think, at the moment for the criminals, it's a really good business model. And the reason it's a good business model is because so many businesses are paying. And I sort of understand why. But I think if we link that to sort of cyber insurance, there's potentially, if you get the experts in and the incident response guys, there's the potential of not having to pay. So that's the first sort of big thing for me, is to sort of get people to understand that this prevents potentially you paying criminals, and that business model continuing. Because if you haven't got any insurance and you get hit with that ransomware, what are you going to do? I've spoken to businesses, and generally, right, all we can do is pay, because we don't know what else we can do, or we've now gone to an expert. And so I'm thinking of one particular example of a business I spoke to. The ransom was £1,000. In order to sort of get work done on their decrypt their data, was going to cost £8,000. So what they're going to do? But maybe if they'd have spent the substantially less amount on cyber insurance right at the start, then that issue wouldn't have arisen, and somebody could have recovered their data, and they wouldn't be paying criminals money, which then sort of keeps that sort of whole business model going.
So yeah, absolutely. So closing the gap closes the gap, in other words, in some ways. Yeah, that's really helpful. Tom, thoughts from you?
Yeah, I think could you repeat the question again? Sorry, Mark.
Yeah, so the one thing that you would look to, the one problem that you see that stops people from engaging in cyber insurance, what's the biggest thing that we should be looking to change and solve between us?
Well, I think just continuing really what we're doing. I think the idea of the cyber resilience centre is great. Just continue to improve and educate people on making them aware of the risks. I think as an industry, and I think it's getting more simplified. But I think there's a lot of jargon in this sector. I think there's a lot of IT cyber security jargon, which if you're in it, you understand it. But at the same time, the buyer that you're trying to get an audience that is buying a product, which is with all that jargon. I think we've got to just keep improving that sort of language and making it more accessible and easier for people to understand. And I think putting it into more layman's terms, using more examples. I think the example that Paul used, it's a bit like your house. You buy house insurance. That's the property, it's a tangible asset. Your data is a non-tangible asset, but that's effectively your property, isn't it? But it's in a digital format. So I just think keeping that going. And but I'm pretty optimistic. I think that over the last few years, I think it's come on really well. I think insurers are pretty much, they're getting there really, and with the products, I think that's evolved. But I do think, as you pointed out earlier, the government's saying 7% take up, and we're talking to some insurers, they think around about 10%. That is way too low in the UK. You talk to, I've heard people say in the US it's around about 40%, getting to 50%. Why is that? What's that? Why is that happening? So I'm hoping, give it a few years, this will grow, and hopefully in 2 or 3 years we'll be saying that's getting up to 30-40%. So I do think it's going in the right direction, and you just got to keep banging the drum, I think. So.
Keep on keeping on. So that sounds like a message we can all probably subscribe to. Motto for me. Emma, thoughts from you? Biggest thing that we need to sort?
Yeah, I think Thomas touched on it there, and we've touched on it previously. It's just knowledge and education around the risks, really. And we've mentioned jargon. And I think for us as brokers, it's sometimes demystifying cyber cover for the purchaser of cyber cover, because there can be some jargon there. So it's relating, the risks that they have, explaining the covers that are in the policy. So if we call it cyber insurance, but what does that actually mean to the buyer? So we just need to talk about their risks. Is it data breaches, and how does that affect them? Is it business interruption? Is it and if a ransomware happened to them, how would that affect them and the covers on a policy? So it really is about education of the risk generally. I think we've moved a lot as a country and worldwide really in that. We're so used to insuring traditional risks, but things have changed, and these emerging risks are here, and they're here to stay, and we need to sort of update our attitude to risk, I suppose, to include some of these these covers in. So cyber, being up there with that needs to be included to protect our businesses, going forward.
So probably some increased awareness at senior levels as well within those businesses that would really help.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Shaune, lastly to you, and again, hospital passes I like to. So there are three kind of problems there, which probably around the demand side, I suppose, that, you know, what we need of businesses. Is there a gap at all around the supply side? So in terms of the products that the industry is putting out there, does that look right at the moment, or is there work to be done in order to ensure that things are more accessible for small businesses and charities? What's your view?
I think there are some very good products out there now, and I think they've been tested over the last sort of 4 or 5 years. I also see a situation at the moment where there's new entrants to the market. So I think you'll see more providers and more products. But for me, I suppose it's about confidence of the buyer. You know, and you know, you would want to say to people, you don't need to be an IT security expert to buy this product. I'd say the same to brokers as well. You know, you can't expect brokers to be IT security experts as you could expect them to be lawyers if you're providing legal expenses insurance. But it's giving them the confidence, and part of that is the jargon, the IT security jargon. You know, it can be difficult to overcome. But I suppose as a business, you know, if you're outsourcing your IT, you're paying for that. So, you know, ask your IT provider to help you. You know, if you've got proposal forms to complete with the broker, go back to your IT provider and say, you know, do I have DMARC? Do I have endpoint encryption? Whatever these things are. There are also, you know, really good glossaries out there now, what some of these things mean. So BIBA has a cyber insurance guide, NCSC, lots of people, probably yourselves. So the information is there. I would just have the confidence to go and find out more, to inquire. And I suppose, you know, to go to a broker and explore this won't cost you anything. But it, you know, it might save your business down the line.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which kind of brings us back to almost where we started, doesn't it? That this is something that we know not enough people engage with, but by gosh, when you need it, you really do need it. And that's the point when it's probably too late to start thinking, if only. And that I know is pretty much the experience of Paul and I as we deal with small businesses end to end. Folks, thank you so much. I'm going to wrap things up there, I think. I think just kind of summarize. So we've kind of cantered through a number of the problems today. We've looked at why businesses might not engage, why the levels of take up are quite low. Those things might be around the complexity, it might be around confidence, it might be around the need for a sales pitch, it might be around, I quite like Paul's idea of creating a virtuous circle here. So definitely something about generating momentum. But I think probably the next conversation for us will be around actually how we come together to solve some of those problems, because I suspect, and I'm sitting on my hands and I'm itching, I suspect there are ways that cyber resilience centres can help with this once we understand the needs better. And I'm sure that between us, we work with enough business organisations that we can bring together a really valuable conversation. So I'll draw things to a close there before I monologue for too long. Thank you all so much for your time. And I'll look forward to seeing you for stage 2 of this one in a few weeks' time. Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.